computer. All right, can we start?
Okay.
Alrighty, you all. So, greetings. Welcome to Metro City Community College. This is our NASPA case study. We are AAA, and hopefully you'll get it at the end of our introductions. But I am Alexandra Thomas, and I am from Montgomery, Alabama.
My name is Aiden Gutierrez.
And my name is Armstrong Kumatia from Ghana.
All right, so we're going to go ahead and get started with the overview of what all we'll be discussing in the case study today. So we're going to be just going over the context, the issues, the both central and secondary, connecting the theory and the research to the problem, and then our proposed solution with both short-term and long-term goals, and then an overall summary of the case study and what we've come up with. Okay, so just a brief overview of the institution. It is Metro City Community College. It is open access and it is an urban two-year institution in the northeastern of the United States. The population is very diverse. We have over 33 Hispanics, 20% Asian, 18% African American students, and then 28 white students. And there are 15,000 students enrolled and 62 attend part-time. The nature of this school is computer route, so it makes it very crisis detection and student engagement way more complex, being that we have a lot of our students traveling on and off of our campus for school. And just the overview of the case study, we have a student named Gabe Chen who survives a suicide attempt following a breakup with a fellow student, Sarah Lewis. Gabe is a sophomore accounting major and has very good academic strength, but very limited physical support. And Sarah's a first-year social work student who is now experiencing a lot of trauma and emotional impact due to the situation just happening. And now, because of this situation, the institution is now involved. The police did respond to the issue, but there was no criminal charges against the student, despite the law regards to the situation. Dr. Regina Wallace is the Dean of Students, and she's also the BRT chair that is responsible for coordinating the institutional response. And then she has several other people on her team, such as the Title IX officer, as well as the student care director, and then the first responder, who will all play like a huge impact on this role of creating the solution to her.
Yeah, so the central issue that we identified as a team with the case study is just making sure that we can identify how Metro City Community College should handle their response to the situation, both in the short term and the long term. Things that we must especially consider, we decided, are mental health and student care, relationship violence concerns, and campus safety. Overall, the goal is not only to respond effectively, but also to prevent future occurrences by fostering a safer and more supportive campus environments for all the students. So during the rest of our presentation, we will discuss some of the ways that we believe this can be done. So we also made sure to identify the secondary issues, and the first issue that we identified was the legal concerns associated with the topic, specifically focusing on Title IX and whether or not Gabe's actions should be classified as domestic violence. We believe it should be because Gabe's suicide note clearly indicates an intent to harm Sarah emotionally, and based on Metro City's Student Conduct Code, which defines domestic violence as an emotional it defines domestic violence as a harm or threat of harm to a student that the school cares about. We argue that the situation for sure falls under the category of domestic violence. And although there was no formal criminal charge, the emotional and psychological threat that Gabe posed to Sarah falls within the scope of Title IX protections, which mandate that the institution address the incidents of relationship violence, even in the absence of criminal charges. The secondary issue that we determined was psychological concerns and the impact that has on both Gabe and Sarah. Gabe, being the one that attempted suicide, requires immediate mental health support and a risk assessment. His mental state should be evaluated to determine if he poses a future risk to himself, but also to other students or just other people. And of course, we also believe that ongoing counseling should be offered to Gabe to help him get through this tough time that he's dealing with. For Sarah, the psychological toll of learning that her former partner's suicide attempt was linked to her is something that's really, really difficult to go through, and it cannot be underestimated or undervalued, especially given the explicit nature of the suicide note that she received. Or even though she's not aware of it yet, we think she should be told about it because it's something that could potentially pose a threat to her if she does not find out in the future. And MCC should also provide Sarah with mental health support, ensuring that she feels safe and supported during this difficult time, as well as we should consider clear safety measures to protect Sarah from any future potential emotional or physical retaliation. Finally, the last secondary issue that we had to consider was that structural concerns about the school's existing policies and response protocols. The situation especially highlights the gaps in the school and their ability to handle the mental health crisis and issues of domestic violence. The college needs to review and strengthen its response mechanisms, including making procedures a lot clearer for addressing mental health crisis and potential relationship violence. And there should be clear guidelines on when a situation like this requires Title IX response, and also how the college can practically support both affected students in the aftermath of such a crisis. This would involve a lot of like integration of mental health services and student conduct policies and strong communication across departments to ensure a better cohesive response.
Okay, so I'll be continuing from the theory, and the theory here we have Schlossberg's 4S transition model, and we also have the Comia and Hackmer's model. With the Schlossberg transition theory in 1981, it explains how individuals experience, they interpret and cope with life transitions. And these transitions can be categorized into anticipated, unanticipated, and non-event. This theory evaluates the ability to cope with life transition using 4 categories, which has to do with situation, self, support, and strategies. So basically, this reflects how individuals see the transition. The self has to do with who they are. The support has to do with what their support network is. And with the strategies, what can they do to adjust to the situation? So in 1995, Schlossberg's theory got integrated with the Comey and Hackmer's model. And this model seeks to assist individuals in their transition process. And this is what this model entails: building relationship, assessment, goal setting, counselor intervention, and termination. So basically, these are the processes that a counselor goes through in order to assist an individual having a transition problem. And from the case study, we can see that currently the BRT team, which is the behavioral response team, they are currently at the assessment stage because they were arguing about how to categorize the event. So in order for the team to move forward and address the problem, they will need to analyze the 4S of the individuals involved. So in analyzing the 4S of the individuals involved, the first one, which has to do with the situation. First, we can see that with Gabe, he has an unanticipated breakup. That is the situation. And for Sarah, she's currently experiencing a non-event which has turned into crisis, which is about to turn into crisis because she's being exposed to trauma because of Gabe's attempt to commit suicide. The next one, which has to do with the self. The self has to do with the internal resources. And with the internal resources, we can see that for Gabe, his high academic achievement is overshadowing his ability to handle breakup. And with Sarah, we can see that she's self-assured and also hardworking, and she's emotionally intelligent. With the support, which has to do with the external resources, we can see that for Gabe is isolated and his only resource or primary resource has to do with Sarah. And since Sarah isn't there, there is a problem with him. For Sarah, she cares about her friends, and we can see that she has a strong personal support group. About the strategies, which has to do with how they will cope, we can see that Gabe was trying to use a maladaptive way to cope. And for Sarah, she needs new strategies because she's being exposed to trauma. Okay, so those are the 4 analyses that the BR team will assess. And they are going to use this counseling process to address the issue. Now, in counseling, the first one will be how are they going to build a relationship? So in building of the relationship, they will need to use, how do you call it? a trauma-informed group to talk to Sarah and disclose the threats that Gabe has exposed to Sarah. And about Gabe, they will need to use the non-punitive engagement process with Gabe so that it will establish a rapport with Gabe. Next is the assessment process. With the assessment, the BR team is currently stuck here, and they are kind of using the internal resources and client environment. And you can see that for the internal resources, Gabe is currently experiencing like a mental health. And this mental health cannot be considered in isolation without assessing its threat to Sarah. So the assessment must conclude that there is both a health crisis and conduct violation in this issue. Next is the BRT team will need to set a goal, and the goal here is to stabilize Gabe in the sense that they will need to modify the environment by removing him from campus, or they'll issue a non-contact directive until he becomes stable. And in the case of Sarah, they will need to increase the institutional support, so they will offer her counseling, safety planning, so that she can remain on campus. About the intervention, which is the next one here, so the counselor's intervention. The BLT must use problem-solving techniques, so they can use the non-contact directive approach, and they also need to kind of monitor Gabe, so that this is done to kind of ensure that there is, how do I call it? There is care and accountability. So this is where the care and accountability comes in. And they also use the reframing. The reframing here, since there's cognitive distortion, they would have to advise Gabe that currently Gabe thinks suicide is a valid tool for relationship punishment. So they would have to advise him so that he knows that suicide is not a valid approach. And for Sarah, her reframing will be that she should understand that she's not responsible for Gabe's action. Gabe is the one responsible for whatever he's going through. And the last one has to do with termination. So termination and follow-up talks about continuous support for Gabe, in a sense that he's currently trying to transfer to K-State University. So they'll need to kind of offer him care and see whether he's fit enough to transfer to the K-State University. Also, they have to also like follow up to determine if he can do this safely, or if the conduct process will kind of have an impact on his ability to transfer out of the school. And there should be a long-term trauma support for Sarah. Her exit here is to kind of complete her degree without any ongoing trauma. So, and then later on, BRT team will need to refine their policy and their policies that they have. Okay. So these are some of the issues I discussed. Okay. So, I'll talk a little about the short, what they should do immediately. I've spoken about some. So some of their immediate actions will be to invoke the FEPA. I've disclosed that Dr. Wallis will need to authorize a disclosure content of the suicide note to Sarah. The rationale is that Sarah has only been informed of the situation, and she's yet to be told about the details. And the team in charge of the care and Title IX would have to do that. Also, another immediate strategy will be to use temporary non-contact directive for both parties, so that they will not be in touch whilst the issue is resolved. The other team would have to visit Gabe in the hospital and to offer him support until he becomes fit enough to return to school. So those are the immediate actions they will need to take. And in the short term, I think they will need to initiate a conduct process. So the issue here is that Gabe will need to be charged, because he has violated the domestic violence. So he will need to be charged for that. And The rationale here is that the suicide attempt was deliberate. It was a deliberate attempt to harm Sarah. The next has to do with the academic policy. So the dean of students would have to get in touch with both parties, faculty, and kind of, since they'll be missing out of class, they'll need to inform the faculty so that they kind of give them an extension on the assignments in order to retransition them into the school. They should also offer them mandatory counseling and case management. So there should be a weekly counseling sessions for the students. And the last has to do with ongoing trauma recovery. So they should be guided and coached to reintegrate them into the school premises.
Yeah, and lastly, with the last few minutes that we have left, we'd like to quickly, just kind of go over some long-term changes that we believe would benefit, all the parties involved in the case study. One of the first being that we propose like a comprehensive review and revision of the institutional policies at the school at Metro City, which would involve, just reevaluating these policies, all of them related to mental health crisis, domestic violence, and student conduct, and ensuring that the policies are really clear and effective as to what has to happen when a situation like this does occur. Because again, that was one of the issues that we saw within the case study. And also making sure that we highlight and prioritize a stronger integration of Title IX protections. And overall, we think that this will help the college better respond to situations like Gabe's and ensure there's a clear process for dealing with relationship violence, mental health crisis, and ensuring the safety of all the students. Second, we think we need to build and strengthen a lot of mental health services on campus, which would include expanding counseling services, crisis intervention programs, and providing just ongoing mental health monitoring for students who may be struggling. Especially in this case, it would be Gabe, and making sure that, or Gabe and Sarah, making sure that they're fine, months after this happens, years after this happens, as long as they're at the school. Make sure the school allocates resources towards them and helping, increase their level of comfortability on the campus and just overall happiness. Third, we recommend the creation of campus-wide training and awareness programs on the issues of mental health, domestic violence, and how to access resources, just making sure that there's people available for people to go to when anything like this does happen. In this case, this wasn't the scenario, but let's say Gabe had talked to somebody, that person could have maybe forwarded them to the proper resources that would help them, and overall it could have prevented this whole situation as a whole. That kind of goes in part with the fourth trend that we believe should be implemented, which involves purposely enhancing student engagement and community support. Again, the other point kind of had to do with more faculty and staff training, and this point has to do a lot more with student engagement. And as we know, student engagement is one of the big driving factors in student affairs, and initiatives like peer mentorship programs, student support networks, and campus-wide community building events, can really help students find a community on campus where they feel engaged and supported. So had either Gabe or Sarah had these opportunities, maybe they could have felt a lot better about everything going on, either prior to the suicide attempt from Gabe or afterwards, with having to get back to feeling a lot better about what happened. Overall, just when students are connected to a stronger community, they're more likely to seek help when they need it and less likely to feel isolated in a time of crisis. We think these long-term changes aren't just about reacting to a single incident, but overall building a campus culture that prioritizes the mental health, safety, and well-being for all students. And this is definitely something that MCC should push towards.
Okay, so overall, this case requires offers the most ethical and effective response. And with Schlossberg's, it helps explains the unanticipated transition of crisis from the failed coping mechanisms that were used and the emotional vulnerabilities of both Gabe and Sarah. And then with Cromer and Hackney, they provided a structure of how the institution responds with both relationship building to assessment, intervention, and follow-ups. And so our model just balances the trauma informed with care and also the behavioral expectations of what we expect from our students. Also, while being in compliance with FERPA, Title IX, ADA, and the state law. And then with this approach, it protects all individual students while maintaining the campus safety and the institutional integrity. And MCC must respond in this way to mitigate future risk of other students, but also help support healing. And our proposed model strengthens MCC's ability to respond not only to this incident, but for our future crises if they were to happen with consistency and care. Thank you all. We hope you enjoyed our presentation and we look forward to hearing back from you all.